Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to episode 151 of the Falcoholic Live. I'm your host, Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin on Twitter, joined by two wonderful guests this evening. First of all, we have from the Falcoholic podcast, he is David Walker, aka Falcoholic DW on Twitter. DW, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. It's good to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I went on the pod, yesterday. So we have to, it's like a favors game between the two shows. So, I went on, now you have to come on,
Exactly.
you scratch my back, that sort of thing. So thanks for coming on, man. We appreciate you. But we also have another host of a completely separate Falcons program, Locked on Falcons. He is Aaron Freeman at FalcFans on Twitter. Aaron, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. Happy to be joined by the official host of the Falcoholic podcast, as one former official host of that podcast once a time.
It's brutal out there on these podcast streets. Okay, it's there was a death match, I believe, involved for that first one that you had.
It was a
Aaron,
knife fight.
And then there was, I think, some other shady happenings going on. So it's, that I didn't want that gig personally. It sounds a little too dangerous for me. But
Dave Choate tripped me, so that's why I lost the knife fight.
Yep, that sounds about right. Yep. And welcome in, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We do encourage you guys to like and subscribe. If you enjoy the show, you can check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Falcoholic Live. A quick plug on that. We're going to be doing our July Falcons question and answer session for our patrons on Friday at 5 p.m. We've already got some great guests lined up for that, so make sure to tune in for that if you're a patron. If you're not a patron, like I said, you can head to the site and sign up anytime before Friday at 5 p.m. and get in on that action, and it's a good time. So check that out, guys. But tonight's show is focused on bold Falcons training camp predictions. And, I only want the boldest, so that means if you're not predicting Felipe Franks beating out Matt Ryan, I don't want to hear your take. No, we're going to, within reason, bold Falcons training camp predictions. Talk about, some of the most interesting stuff out there. But get into it a little bit. There are a few position battles that are very much up in the air that we'll talk about. And then I'm interested to see where everybody else is leaning on some of these things. So we're going to jump right into that, guys. And yeah, we're a week away from training camp officially tomorrow. So exciting stuff there as well. All right. So let's kick things off with the news that we still haven't signed anyone to replace Barkevious Mingo. So, Aaron, we haven't gotten your take at all, and I haven't heard DW's either on what you think they're going to do with that last roster spot. Do you think it is just going to be another edge guy, or do you think it's going to be something totally random at this point?
Yeah, I would assume it's going to be an edge guy. I assume it's going to be somebody, similar to what we've had in previous off seasons, where on the eve of training camp, when guys are supposed to report. So I guess Monday, Tuesday night, we'll get some news that the Falcons signed somebody, probably just a camp body, given that we haven't heard any real buzz about the Falcons going after any big names at this point in time. Plus, I don't think the Falcons want to spend money until after they start to see some of these guys in training camp, so that they can really get a firm handle on how much money they're going to have to spend, late in August and in early September, when they're sort of scouring the waiver wire to probably improve some areas of their rosters. So I would expect sort of a cheap veteran player. Maybe if they can get someone like a Kamale Correa on a veteran minimum deal or something like that, that would probably be the biggest type of move that I could see for that roster spot. But, I'm not expecting Justin Houston to sort of stroll through that door anytime soon. But hopefully, he'll go unsigned through the month of August, and we'll still be able to sort of swing back and come back at that later, maybe a month from now.
Yeah, you're going to be crushing people's dreams if you say Justin Houston's not coming here. So, let's tone down that. Okay, that's not very bold. You got to say Justin Houston's signing tomorrow. Okay, that's more of the vibe we're going with. So we're going to have to cut this and restart. But no, yeah, I agree with you. It is probably more likely to be someone cheaper. But Kamale Correa is definitely a name to watch because of the history with DMPs, obviously. DW, your thoughts on that open roster spot? What do you think is going to happen there?
Yeah, I think it's got to be an edge. Just because it's such a shallow position for the Falcons at this point. I think it'll be a young guy. I think they're going to go for, a younger college free agent, someone that went undrafted, or someone that maybe the first few days of camp doesn't make it out of camp with another team. The thing to remember with veterans is once you get past the point where you're vested, a lot of veterans don't like to participate in training camp. They intentionally, like someone like Justin Houston, he may not even want to be in training camp. He may be waiting for that preseason to begin, for the regular season to kick in, and teams like to wait for those veterans until after the first game, because then they don't have to guarantee their contract for the entire season. And that's something to keep in mind. So I think I do think the roster is going to be fluid, but I think initially it's probably just going to be, like Aaron said, it's going to be a camp body. It's going to be someone that is unlikely to make the 53-man roster at this point.
Yeah, I agree. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Obviously, the state of the edge group is, less than stellar heading into training camp. We'll be talking about that, I'm sure, over the course of the evening. But, I know a lot of folks are hoping for Justin Houston. Melvin Ingram seems to be sort of narrowing down his options, and the Falcons don't appear to be one of them, which isn't totally shocking for the reasons that, Aaron mentioned, that, too expensive, most likely. The Falcons probably aren't looking to spend a ton of money there. So it'll be interesting to see who they land on. Kamalai Correa is a guy, but there are a lot of other reliable veterans. There's like Jabal Sheard, Trent Murphy, who's, getting up there certainly, but these are guys that have played, solid roles as, edge 2 and 3s over the years. And in Atlanta, they'd probably be good enough to be the second edge at this point. Maybe they're better than Dante Fowler too, if we're being honest. But so yeah, we'll see how that goes. Hopefully somebody comes in that's somewhat competent, and the pass rush isn't a complete disaster. But we've talked about it. Dean Pease isn't as reliant on having the star edge guys. He likes to kind of cobble it together and make it work with a bunch of guys getting a few sacks instead of two guys getting a lot of sacks. And we've heard that story a lot in Atlanta over the years, and it generally hasn't worked out super well. So maybe like the 15 times the charm. We'll see. But oh man. All right. Well, on a lighter note,
I'm feeling triggered.
Yeah, I'm very triggered now, so I gotta totally reset here. But there's a lot, I think, of interesting battles to talk about going into training camp. A lot of interesting things this offseason with the completely different offense coming in under Arthur Smith, with a defense that's probably not going to be that different in terms of actual plays, but in terms of style, going to be very blitz heavy. I know Aaron's pointed out on his show, people probably forget, but the Falcons were fairly blitz heavy once Raheem Morris took over, so it's going to be more like the second half of last season as opposed to the first half in terms of what the defense looks like. But let's go around the horn and get started with some spicy training camp predictions. You can basically make it about whatever you want. I won't say it has to be about a roster battle. It could be whatever you want. But Aaron, as the illustrious guest this evening, why don't you start us off with one of your boldest training camp predictions here?
Well, I don't know if this is my boldest one, but
okay, it doesn't have. We can warm up to it too. So
no, it's fine. I'll throw this out there, and you guys be the judge if it's the boldest one I got. I think from that 2018 Falcons draft class, the only players left on the roster when we get to week 1 will be first or sixth round picks. I think some of the guys that were taken, in rounds 2 through 4, obviously the fourth round guys already gone in Edo Smith, but maybe those second and third round guys aren't going to necessarily make the cut this year in large part. And if you don't know who I'm referring to, I'm talking about Isaiah Oliver and Dejan Sanat. And I think in large part, the reason I feel that way is because I feel like the Falcons drafted essentially their two replacements in this year's draft class, with Darren Hall for Isaiah Oliver and Taquan Graham for Dejan Sanat. And, when you have a new regime coming in, they like their guys as opposed to the other team's guys. And so I feel like with those two selections are firm shots across the bow for those two individual players from the 2018 draft. We know Isaiah Oliver showed improvement once he moved to nickel cornerback spot last year, but I don't necessarily know if that's the future of him. I feel when you look at Darren Hall and what he was at San Diego State, which was purely an outside corner, but for the Falcons to draft him in round 4, I feel like at least what that tells me is that they really like his potential as an inside corner, not necessarily because of his potential as an outside corner. And so I feel like the Falcons are going to want to get him started as that nickel cornerback as soon as possible. And if that's the case, then I don't see the reason for the Falcons to necessarily keep Isaiah Oliver, because you have a player like Kendall Sheffield who has that versatility to play inside and outside. And unlike Isaiah Oliver, has, a lot more experience playing on special teams, and so has been more productive in that arena. And you guys know me, I'm a big fan of special teams.
Yep.
And how much it matters to how these roster battles wind up going.
Yeah.
And then with Dejan Sanat, I feel like, he's been sort of the forgotten man these last couple of years, in large part due to the presence of Tyler Davidson being a little bit more that 3-4 nose tackle fit. I don't see that changing under Dean Pease. I think the fact that the Falcons went out after the draft and picked up guys like Ilianku and Olive Sangapalu and John Atkins, tells you that they're not happy with their nose tackle depth behind Davidson. And so that's also a strong consideration why Dejan Sanat is probably on the bubble. So when I'm looking at this 2018 draft class, I think it's going to be, once we get to week one, it's going to be Calvin Ridley, Russell Gage, and Foye Oluokun. Obviously, the three players that so far out of that draft class have, outperformed expectations, or at least maybe in Calvin Ridley's case, lived up to expectations. And so I think you'll start to slowly see, these former draft classes of Thomas Dimitrov, starting with that 2018 draft class, start to get pushed out the door. And then we'll see sort of what happens with the 2019 guys, a year from now.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very interesting tack to take. And they really have brought in a ton of defensive tackles in general. Like, I think the depth, that's one of the few positions I think where the depth is actually like really solid, and there's actually a pretty good competition for some of those spots. But it's hard to slot in Dejan Sanat there. It's hard to see how he'll fit in there without a really exceptional camp. So, if he doesn't have that, he's not the draft pick anymore. And it seems like even the people that drafted him didn't really want to play him. So, it's interesting that he stuck around, that the team didn't move on from him, despite, like you said, bringing in guys like Sagapolu and Atkins. And, I would have been surprised if they ended up drafting a nose tackle as well. They didn't do that, but that is an interesting one. And yeah, with Oliver, the big thing is, financially, they would save over $2 million by cutting Oliver. So if they do think that Darren Hall basically gives them, 90% of Oliver at half the cost, they might decide to go that route, because the salary cap has clearly been their biggest priority in terms of just trying to limit the damage next year and really trying to get clear of a lot of these bad contracts or just expensive contracts by 2023. So, yeah, I'm interested to see what happens there. DW, you have any thoughts on those predictions?
Aaron takes all the great predictions, so I'm going to go. I'm going to go in a different direction.
Okay, all right.
I want to talk about wide receiver. We all know Calvin Ridley is going to take over for Julio at wide receiver 1. I think it's pretty clear Russell Gage will slide into that wide receiver 2 position at this point, given his productivity and his connection with Matt Ryan, which was, I think, understated over the past couple of years. Wide receiver 3, though, I think there's several names that have been on the roster, guys like Christian Blake, Olamide Zaccheaus. I think they will all get passed by Frank Darby. I think the rookie will pass them. He will be wide receiver 3 by the time training camp is over. I think the Falcons they've been reserved about how they feel about this rookie class, but Darby is someone that I think is going to fit that role nicely, where he's going to do one thing, but he's going to do one thing really well. And they're not looking for him to come in and be necessarily a guy that's going to run the entire route tree. But I think for what he does, he's going to be the guy that's going to get more snaps than even the guys who've been on the roster for a couple of years and that have been ahead of him. So I am buying in on Frank Darby being wide receiver 3 by the time the season starts.
Yeah, that's a bold one, because I know that is one of the more hotly contested jobs on offense in terms of who's going to be the outside wide receiver opposite Calvin Ridley. And I think some folks really do believe, like, oh yeah, Russell Gage is going to play outside, and maybe there's a chance that happens. But when we say that Arthur Smith doesn't run 11 that much. He still runs 11 like 38-ish% of the time. Like that's still a significant number of snaps. So like even if Gage only does play the slot, he's still going to be playing, 30-40% of the offensive snaps, and that's still a significant role for him. It's not as big of a role as he saw under Dirk Cutter, where the Falcons were running 11 like 60-70% of the time. But Arthur Smith is going to run 12 personnel, like almost as much or more than he runs 11. So that outside wide receiver is going to be getting a lot of snaps, obviously. And yeah, I mean, it could be Frank Darby. Like I know that people who were watching him in OTAs, we weren't necessarily involved in that, were impressed. He was definitely been one of the players that's been commented on the most, possibly because of his like infectious attitude. I think we've had multiple undrafted players now tell us that, oh yeah, he's like the funniest guy on the whole team. And, he's a good dude. So I think that attitude and his character, is infectious, and that obviously helps him, endear himself to the coaching staff and the rest of the team. But yeah, I guess for me, it's like, I'm a big fan of Zaccheaus. So, Zaccheaus also has played some from the slot too. So it's like, is he going to be able to make that transition outside as well? That's interesting. Tajay Sharp also involved there. I think once they signed Sharp, I was like, okay, he's basically wide receiver 3. But, I think it is more of an open competition than a lot of folks might think. And it's always exciting. Wide receiver competitions are always fun because you're actually going to get to watch a lot of these guys play in the preseason. Ridley's not really going to play. Gage probably not really going to play either. So we're going to get to see a lot of Zaccheaus and Frank Darby and Tajay Sharp and some of these other guys going out there with some of these other quarterbacks. And it'll be, so I think if I had to plant my flag, I'd plant it on Zaccheaus at this point. But I don't blame anyone that's a big fan of Darby. Aaron, where do you stand on the wide receiver 3 battle right now?
Yeah, I have no idea. I feel like Zaccheaus is the most talented of the group. Like I would even, probably the boldest thing I'll say about that is like, I think you can make a case that Zaccheaus is, from a pound for pound talent standpoint, might be the second best wide receiver on the team after Calvin Ridley.
Wow.
And so like, because of that belief, I want Zaccheaus to kind of be the third guy. But at the same time, when you sort of look at how the roster is structured, it does seem like guys like Frank Darby and Tajay Sharp will probably get, an opportunity greater than what Zaccheaus is going to be, where he's just kind of be relegated to being Calvin Ridley's backup like he was for most of last year. And so I think there's a real opportunity for someone like a Frank Darby. If he can come in and play well, I think he'll have an opportunity to win that job. My biggest question with Frank Darby is just like, he's a good player, but I don't know how NFL ready he is. Right. I feel like he's a little bit of a project. And so I feel like if he was a little bit more of a polished player coming into the league, and you saw at Arizona State, a guy that was, this all around, did every type of thing rather than sort of what DW was sort of hinting at being that sort of vertical threat, then I would feel a lot better about predicting Frank Darby to be the sort of front runner for that number 3 spot. But I think because you have some concerns about what exactly his strengths are, and if all it is just taking the top off of a defense, and then when you're that type of player and you only run like a 4.6, right. That's not necessarily a great combination if that's what your role is going to be. So I do wonder if Frank Darby will have the opportunity, and if he can show some other skills beyond that sort of verticality that would allow him to impress enough to win that number 3 spot. So to me, it's kind of a coin toss. Like if you're asking me in my sort of own fantasy world, what I would prefer, I'd probably prefer Zaccheaus. But if I was to make a prediction, like I feel like Darby is as good a bet as anybody to be that number 3 guy.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't think there's really any reason to count any of these guys out. I know Christian Blake has his fans too. You can't really count me as one of them, but, no offense, Blake, but yeah, I mean, I just like, yeah, I mean, people forget Zaccheaus in terms of like, it was unusual for someone with his sort of production and like, I mean, sort of star status. Like, I mean, I think in what, I think it was Virginia where he played, or I think it was Virginia. He was like their number 1 wide receiver. He had a ton of yards, a ton of production. He was like their major threat on offense and went undrafted because, these last few receiver classes have been absolutely loaded. But, Zaccheaus came out and had that 93-yard touchdown for his first catch. And I just feel like, he has a lot of untapped potential. I think people think of him as an undrafted free agent, but, you might want to consider that these days, these late round wide receivers and these undrafted wide receivers, they are as talented a lot of times as day 3 picks. Like early day 3 guys, there's just not that much difference sometimes between those types of players because of the talent level at wide receiver in college football right now. And, I like Zacchaeus a lot. I like Darby a lot. I like Sharp a lot. I mean, I think the only one that I would be pretty unenthused if they ended up winning the wide receiver 3 battle would be Christian Blake. Not because I don't think he's a quality NFL receiver. I just don't want him playing wide receiver 3. Wide receiver 5, wide receiver 4 even, we could talk about that. But, I think the upside isn't quite there with Blake only because, in terms of size, speed, not really anything special. Just I think a guy that works hard and clearly knows, where he's supposed to be on every play is, he was Julio's backup frequently. So, you have to trust a guy for him to play that sort of role. But, yeah, definitely one of the most interesting battles, I think. And I'm sure I'm probably going to have another wide receiver prediction later for some of the other guys out there. So you guys can look forward to that. But we'll move away from wide receiver for a moment here. For my bold prediction here, and I know someone in the chat was asking about running back, so my bold prediction is going to deal with running back. A lot of guys there, a lot of names, obviously Mike Davis, the big one, but in terms of what's behind him, totally up in the air right now. But based on what we've heard so far, I'm going to go with the surprising choice here and say I think actually Quadri Olison is going to be the running back too. We've heard a lot that he's actually getting a lot of first-team reps in OTAs. Obviously, not every player is there in OTAs. Some of these folks aren't necessarily appearing there, but I don't think Cordarrelle Patterson is going to get more than like 5 to 8 touches a game in terms of running back carries. And if they are serious about more running back touches in general, it's really going to be down to Olison, Javian Hawkins, Caleb Huntley, and Tony Brooks-James. They're all kind of out there at the same time. And as much as I like Javian Hawkins, he's, I think, going to be the running back 3 in this offense. He's going to be sort of the change of pace guy. But yeah, I think Olison honestly can do a lot of the same things Mike Davis can do. Not as polished a receiver, but that is a part of his game that we know the team was working on. And they seem to really like him. They moved on from Ito Smith and kept Olison, which I think shocked pretty much everyone. But Olison honestly is a better fit for an Arthur Smith offense than he was for a Dirk Cutter offense. That sort of bowling ball stature, low to the ground, good size, 6'1", 232. This is, a big bodied running back who's known as being smart and good in short yardage. So similar skill set to Mike Davis. I think they can both do some of the same things. So if Olison can sort of gain prowess in the receiving game, I think he has, the potential to at worst be sort of Mike Davis's primary backup, but at best potentially be the running back too. But I'm interested in hearing your guys' thoughts. DW, do you have thoughts on the running back depth behind Mike Davis?
Yeah, Olison's the biggest back on the roster right now.
Technically, yeah.
Yeah, I think people look at Mike Davis and, look at his thighs, which I think weigh 300 pounds each. But no, Olison is actually the biggest back. He's 6'1", 232, according to the Falcons website. And Davis is 5'9", 220. Now, Davis is obviously more compact, but Olison's a big guy. I do think it's interesting that they moved on from Ito Smith, Brian Hill, and they kept Olison. And we're here, as you mentioned, they are giving him a lot of snaps. The one thing I want to point out, and this may be more a factor of Derrick Henry and his skill set, Arthur Smith's offense, at least in 2020, didn't pass to the running back a lot. Not in the way that like Kyle Shanahan did when he had Tevin Coleman and Devontae Freeman here. So I think viewing this upcoming offense in the light of that, I don't think it's even necessary that we have a back at running back 2 that is an accomplished receiver, because that's not something. It's not something that Arthur Smith seemed to really care about or be passionate about. Now, granted, he had the best running back in the game, or one of the best running backs in the game, and that just wasn't a part of what he did. So I think that actually bolsters the case for Olison. And as a reminder too, Tevin Coleman, when he came out, was not considered to be a great receiving back. And between years 1 and 2, he really improved that aspect of his game. and then 2016 really had a phenomenal season in that regard. I'm not saying Olison's going to make the same kind of leap. That would be way too bold. But I think Olison is maybe finally getting a look from this coaching staff. Ironically, the one that didn't draft him, because the one that did draft him never seemed to know what to do with him.
Yeah.
And to be honest, and I'd love to hear what Aaron has to say about this, since he is from Pitt, and I know Aaron is a Pitt guy. I never understood why they drafted him in the first place.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
It didn't make sense, but maybe this new coaching staff sees something in him that Dan Quinn and his guys didn't.
Yeah, I mean, being a Pitt guy, I actually thought he was the second best running back on that team that he was on. Darren Hall, they sort of had a 1-2 combination with those two guys at Pitt, and I thought Darren Hall was the better NFL prospect. But obviously, Olison has managed to stick a lot longer in the NFL than Darren Hall. I think Darren Hall got cut as an undrafted free agent 2 years ago, and I don't think he's been back in the league. I think what's going to be interesting with this running back battle, and I feel like when you have a player like Mike Davis, who DW is talking about not catching, this offense not throwing to the running back a lot. Mike Davis is all the receiver that the Falcons need at that position. It would not be a shocker to me if Mike Davis has like 60 or 70 catches this year, based off of his past production in that arena. And so you might see a stark change from what Arthur Smith's offense has traditionally been, because, it's not to say that Derrick Henry was a poor pass catcher, but obviously throwing the ball to Derrick Henry is not as effective as handing the ball off to him. And so that's kind of how Tennessee used him. But I think what's going to be interesting about this running back 2 battle is because you would think, because of Mike Davis, you would want a running back that's a little bit more of a complementary guy. So a guy like a Cordero Patterson, who has a little bit more juice. Javian Hawkins has a little bit more juice. Those would be the types of guys that you would traditionally look at and say, okay, I got this big bowling ball in Mike Davis. Who's the next best option to complement him? And those two guys would make a lot of sense. But I think what often becomes the case in the NFL is, your value as a running back is not necessarily what you do as a runner, but what you do in the passing game. And that's not exclusive to catching the football. It's about pass protection. Yep. You got these $30 million quarterbacks, and you got to protect those guys in these sort of 6-man productions, with the running back being that 6th guy. And if you have a liability there, and I think that's been a real issue for players like Olson and Brian Hill and Ito Smith these last couple of years, which was part of the reason why the Falcons chose not to trade Devontae Freeman midway through the 2019 season, because they couldn't trust any of these other young running backs to be able to keep Matt Ryan upright. Yeah. And so I think when you look at Olison compared to players like Patterson and Hawkins, even though Olison is unproven in that arena, Patterson really has no experience as a pass protecting running back. He's always been a wide receiver. He's always been a pass catcher when he's been utilized at the running back position. And Javian Hawkins, as talented and as explosive as he is 183 pounds. And that usually is not a good recipe for success if you're going to have to pick up players like Brian Burns and Shaq Barrett, blitzing, or Devin White blitzing up the middle. That's not necessarily the combination that you really want in that situation. So I think Olson, given his size, given his physicality, given at least a little bit of experience doing that, I think does potentially give him a leg up, so that when it does come time to pull Mike Davis off the field, you're going to want a guy that, at least when you decide to throw the ball in those instances, can keep Matt Ryan clean and keep him upright. So I think, that's really where Olison potentially could separate himself from the pack and really be the RB2 that they're looking at. Yeah.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. The pass protection is very, very important, and it's often overlooked, I think, by fans and analysts who are, I love Javian Hawkins. I love his potential. I think he's a guy that will get snaps and will have a role this year, but I just don't know how big that role will be. We don't really know if he can pass protect. We believe he can catch the ball. We had Thor Nystrom from NBC Sports Edge on here, who loved Javian Hawkins, and basically told people not to worry about the fact he didn't have a lot of catches. It was more of a sort of function of the offense. In high school he played receiver, and his catch rate in college was like 70 or 80%. So it's not a guy who has a problem catching the football, just didn't do it a lot. But yeah, if you're not Jacquizz Rodgers, you're probably not a great pass protector at that size. So, Jacquizz Rodgers was kind of his own sort of man. And he didn't, take anything from anyone. And he somehow managed to be a great pass protector despite being just absolutely tiny. So, it's very difficult otherwise to do that. So I'm not going to compare anyone else to Jaquiz Rodgers. He has the title for best pass protecting running back under 200. But yeah, I think this is also one of the more interesting battles on offense. So DW, I'll let you get the next crack here at the predictions. So what's your next bold prediction for the Falcons offseason here?
This one may ruffle some feathers, but this player he's only 26 years old, and he took an adjustment to his contract. And I think being healthy and being motivated by the fact that he has to produce, I think Dante Fowler will live up to his money this year. I'm not saying he's going to stick with the Falcons. But I see, you guys can't see it. I can see Aaron on the screen, and he's having a little bit of this. It's a bold take. This is
bold predictions. Okay,
very bold.
It's probably a dumbass take. I think he'll get an opportunity under Pease to have a much better season than he did last year with the Falcons. So I think with his reduced salary, I think he will not be as much of an eyesore as he was in 2020.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all enjoy that. I think it would be hard to be as bad as he was in 2020 because that was, very not good. Yeah, I mean, I hope you're right, DW, for all of our sakes, because if Fowler could, I mean, he doesn't need to be a double-digit sack guy, but if he could just flirt with like 8, that would be something.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And I think it is a better scheme fit for him in terms of, I think once Raheem Morris took over, Raheem Morris's defense isn't going to be that different from Dean Pease's defense. So, I think people are maybe expecting some sort of seismic shift from what the defense was at the end of the year. And I think Pease is going to be more aggressive, and he's going to play, more sort of fast and loose with the back end guys. There's going to be more rotating and more disguised coverages and that sort of thing, maybe more secondary blitzes, that sort of thing. So it's not going to be exactly the same, but in terms of if you go pop on the tape, if you think the Falcons didn't play a 3-4 and this is a complete change, go pop on literally any game that Raheem Morris or Dan Quinn for that matter was coaching last year. You will see legit 3-4 fronts, straight up nose tackle, two interior, defensive ends, and 2 drop down linebackers on the sides. You will see actual 3-4 formations in every single game because they did it. It's not a new thing. So I just hope Fowler does it better for Dean Pease, and who knows how that happens. But I'm whatever DW's having, I'll have one too. So, Aaron, your thoughts?
Moscow Mule.
Oh, that's perfect. That's my favorite drink. So, I'm definitely in on this take now. So, yeah, Aaron, what are your thoughts on that Dante Fowler take?
Yeah, when DW was saying that, I was doing my impression of the blinking GIF where where he said living up to his money. That's I think Fowler will be better this year. It's the living up to his money thing that I'm like, because how Falcon fans are. When it comes to pass rushers, if you don't get 15 sacks a year, you are a bust, right? And so I think that's kind of what most people would perceive Fowler living up to his money right now. So, I expect a good season, a much better season out of Fowler now that he's healthy. I think a lot of the issues he had last year were due to the injuries that he was dealing with, and those lower leg injuries leading to him not having the same sort of first step quickness, which is his sort of entirety of his pass rush repertoire is built off of, causing some of the issues. So if he's healthy, he'll be better, but you're probably still looking at probably a guy that's 7 or 8 sacks in my eyes, in terms of my optimistic expectation for what he's going to be. So we'll see with Fowler in what he does. But him living up to his money, I think is very bold, given what most people perceive what the Falcons paid to get him, where they were expecting him to have 12 or 13 sacks last year or whatever the case may be. But then again, it's not necessarily fair to base your opinions on the expectations of Falcon fans when it comes to pass rushers, because as I said, everybody either gets 15 sacks or is a bust.
Yeah.
And to counter that, Aaron, I will point out there are a lot of Falcons fans that think that Jake Matthews is wildly overpaid. So I think you and I both agree that is their balance of pay and performance is not necessarily copacetic.
Yeah, we don't accept any Jake Matthews slander on this program, folks. So, I had to write it up. I did the offensive tackle, I think it published today on the site, which was, oh, Jake Matthews, he's only just never, other than his rookie season, ever had a PFF grade below 72.5 in a single season. Only started all 16 games every single year since his rookie season, so... I don't know what people do dislike Jake Matthews for some weird reason. I can't put my finger on it. I don't know what it could possibly be that people don't like about Jake Matthews. And I refuse to acknowledge that such a thing could even exist. And if there was a big time game that perhaps he made a mistake in, I think I must have forgotten about it. But, so that's all I have to say about that. But, we love you, Jake. We love you. So. I didn't say anything specific. Okay, if you guys inferred something from that statement, that's all on you. So, but yeah, all right, Aaron, you can get us started with your next bold prediction.
Okay, so this was the other one that I thought was maybe the boldest one that in relation to my other 2018 draft class bold one. So you guys tell me if it's bolder or less bold. Speaking of Jake Matthews, let's talk about the position next to him, the left guard position. Bold prediction: the week 1 starter at the left guard position is currently not on the Falcons roster.
Oh, see, I actually like this because if it's Josh Andrews, I think I'm gonna be sipping some Moscow Mules just about every Sunday. So, do you have a player in mind, or you just don't think it will be on the roster?
I don't know if this player is necessarily the guy, but I've been reading some reports looking at other teams' 53-man roster predictions, and I'm keeping an eye on that Kansas City Chiefs offensive line battle because they added a bunch of guards this offseason. Mm-hmm. And I know a player that's firmly on the bubble is Andrew Wiley, a player that started in the Super Bowl and really struggled at right tackle, but he was kind of playing out of position. And when he's played guard, he's been a much better fit for them and played some left guard for Kansas City in 2019 as well. And he sort of sees to be on the bubble, but you have other guys like Laurent Duvernay-Tardif. And if the Falcons were to maybe make a Andy Levitre-like trade for a player, Duvernay-Tardif would be a decent candidate in that regard. But, I think he's job might be a little bit safer now that Kyle Long's dealing with his injury or whatever the case may be. So he might be able to be plugged back into his starting right guard spot moving forward. But people that regularly listen to Locked On Falcons know I wasn't a huge fan of the Jalen Mayfield pick. And so while I feel like Jalen Mayfield is the front runner to win that left guard spot, I don't have a whole lot of optimism that he's going to earn it. He's just going to basically be better than Josh Andrews, which, based off of how Josh Andrews has performed in the past, is not necessarily the highest bar to clear.
Right.
So, I feel like, we might get a repeat of what we saw in 2015 when Dan Quinn was in his first offseason and they kind of shuffled up that O-line. And then, we got a preseason game against the Dolphins. And thanks to Earl Mitchell and Derek Shelby exposing some of the weaknesses on our Falcons offensive line, we got a complete reshuffle there. And guess who we're playing again this preseason in what will probably be the dress rehearsal game again in week 2, the Miami Dolphins. So, shout out to Emmanuel Ogbah and whoever else they got over in Miami that will probably wind up exposing this offensive line. It seems to happen every summer. We go back 2 years ago, the Jets game where Ty Sambrailo got completely worked, and the Falcons basically were like, hey, Caleb McGarry, you haven't even practiced yet, but you're the starter now because that's how bad Ty Sambrailo was. So, it just feels like I don't think Arthur Smith's regime is going to break this curse where it seems like all of our dreams come, crashing down in the preseason because on the offensive line. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, at least this year it would be expected. If they trot Josh Andrews out there at left guard, no one's going to be surprised if he gets blown up. So, I mean, there are some, free agents out there potentially. I know people have floated Nick Easton. I've been a big proponent of Steven Wisniewski as a stopgap guy. Not necessarily someone who's going to be a huge impact starter, but a guy that, in a sort of Chris Chester sort of way can kind of keep the ship afloat and not be a total liability. Also, he can play center, which is always a plus. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty slim pickings. Otherwise, we could have the Ben Garland reunion. But Ben Garland's something like 33 years old. I always forget that he kind of had a late start, to his prominence in Atlanta. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's going to be Jalen Mayfield at left guard, and I'm like in some ways fine with that. And part of it is because I think Arthur Smith is not necessarily going to leave his offensive line out there to dry like every single play, like Dirk Cutter seemed to be willing to do. Like, okay, guys, like go block for 3, 4, 5 seconds on this deep pass, and then you'd watch, a bunch of pressures get given up, and he's like, well, that's our offense. That's how we do it. So I don't think Arthur Smith is going to ask that nearly as often. I mean, I'm sure they're going to dial up deep stuff and dial up play action, and it would be nice, if they could protect for that sort of stuff. But Jalen Mayfield's a great run blocker. So I think if they are serious about let's, try to, quote, establish the run and just get back to more balance, I think Jalen Mayfield will be fine in terms of the run game as a pass protector at guard. I don't know. He hasn't played guard, so, it's probably not going to be great. But I don't think Josh Andrews is going to be great either. So, at a certain point, it's like, well, we might as well. I'd rather have Jalen Mayfield being bad than Josh Andrews being bad, because at least Jalen Mayfield's getting reps and is a guy that you're hoping that can, improve. I don't understand the fascination with Josh Andrews that the coaching staff seems to have. And maybe they'll make us all look silly. And maybe Josh Andrews was just languishing in New York under Adam Gase, which, that wouldn't be the first time we've heard that. So, yeah. But, DW, you got any offensive line takes there at left guard?
As Aaron was saying that, I went to the Falcons website to look at offensive line, and the only player that has more than 2 years of experience on the Falcons roster, other than the tackles, is Josh Andrews.
Yep.
Like, that is, I think if there's anything to bolster the case that Aaron is making, it's that. Mm-hmm. And we all sort of have the same opinion on Josh Andrews. The Moscow Mule is beginning to talk for me now. But I personally am not ready to put a rookie at left guard when more than likely you're going to have a young player also at center. I think if you're going to have a young player at center, because right now it's between Hennessy and Drew Dahlman. So you're either starting a second-year player who's never started before, or you're starting a rookie at center. I think the worst thing you could do is put another young player right next to him at left guard. And I think that's why a lot of people are leaning towards, I think, Josh Andrews at this point. But I would be very much a fan of the Falcons pulling another Andy Levitre and going and getting a proven veteran. Doesn't even have to be a quality veteran. Doesn't have to be a guy that's, Pro Bowl level. Even if you just get a guy that is, average to just below average, I think there's someone that they can slot in for 14, 15 games in this 17-game season. Give some of these young guys an opportunity to mature and grow as the season goes on, and get some snaps, hopefully later in games as the games are put away, or the games run away from the Falcons, as it were. But I am not, in general, I am not a fan of putting two young players on the interior of the offensive line together at the same time. And I think that's why you either have to go with Andrews because he is the only veteran of this group, or you have to go out in free agency, as Aaron was indicating. And I'm now suddenly a big fan of this. You have to go out and get another veteran so that you're not starting a bunch of young guys in the middle of an offensive line when you're trying to protect a quarterback who's 36 years old.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Reasonable take, despite the fact that we're like deep into a Moscow Mule. So I'm proud of you, D. I did miss this donation from George Costanza at the $3. George, thanks very much, man. We appreciate you. He says, bold take, I think Fowler's going to get 10 plus sacks, but they will all be in week 18. Then the Falcons will immediately re-sign him. So nice. That's very bold. That's definitely bold, George. So we appreciate that one. But thanks, man. And yeah, guys, George gives me a good opportunity here to remind you guys to like and subscribe, all that good stuff. Check out the Patreon again. our next Q&A will be on Friday at 5 p.m. So if you're interested in taking part in that and you're already a patron, make sure to be there at 5 p.m. You can also send your questions into us. If you're not yet a patron, you can definitely sign up anytime between now and Friday at patreon.com/Falcoholic Live. So next take will be from me. It'll be about the backup quarterback battle. And if you listened to our show yesterday on the Falcoholic podcast, it won't surprise you, but Felipe Franks is quarterback 2 by the end of training camp. Bam. Spicy. What do you guys have to say about that?
Below for AJ McCarron?
No, apparently not. Yeah, poor guy. He doesn't deserve our ire. It's not anything against AJ, really. It's not him. It's us,
Well, I mean, he's got a lovely wife, so even if he gets cut, he'll be all right.
He'll be fine. He'll be fine. Yeah, he's only been in the NFL for like 6 years, collecting those backup checks. So,
Kevin, if you got a perfectly white piece of paper and someone told you to take a pencil and draw a football player with that pencil, and you had no artistic skill whatsoever, and you drew a generic football player on that perfectly white piece of paper, that is AJ McCarron.
There you go.
And that is, he is completely vanilla. In the ice cream world, he is vanilla bean ice cream. In the candy world, he is those awful things that the orange wrappers with the peanut butter candy. He is something you can give out and yet will make you like sour your face when you taste it and you want to throw it away. So Felipe Franks is a complete unknown, but at least he's not the peanut butter candy at Christmas or at Halloween.
Whatever time you eat candy. It could be Christmas even.
It could be Christmas because you kept it around because you refused to eat it.
You find it at the bottom of the bin, you're like, oh, like I really want chocolate right now, but like, oh man, I don't know about this. But look, it's always there for you. That's what AJ McCarron is. He's always there. Okay, he's available. It's still chocolate. It is chocolate in some form or fashion. It's maybe not the chocolate you wanted, but it's a reliable, steady, chocolate to back up the rest of your, chocolate, your high tier chocolate, like your Symphony bar, which is Matt Ryan, so. Anyway, Aaron, did you have a take on this before we talk about chocolate for the next 5 minutes? So.
I was just sitting here thinking like, wow, we have gone off the deep end with the candy rankings,
Yes, that's going to be the next bold take. Yeah.
Comparing all Falcon players to a different candy or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, save that for the candy pod that's coming up later, guys. Yeah,
I might steal that idea. When we get to August and we're going to talk about on Locked On Falcons.
Yep.
I mean, I think AJ McCarron's going to win the job. I think Felipe Franks, as talented as he is, I don't think the Falcons are at a point right now where they're looking for a young quarterback to groom. I think Franks will probably just be the practice squad guy, and may make a couple of big time throws in the preseason that will get people excited. Mm-hmm. And AJ McCarron won't, and it won't get people excited. But we've been down this road before with Falcon veteran backup quarterbacks that don't, let's say, shine in the preseason, but are just kind of just efficient and manage the game. And I think that's kind of what the Falcons want. They had that guy for the last 3-4 years, Matt Schaub, much to the chagrin of a lot of Falcon fans who were rooting for people like Kurt Benkert to overtake him, and he didn't. And I think Kurt Benkert's probably a lot better than Felipe Franks
at this point. Now, I agree. Honestly,
I think Matt Schaub is also a lot better than AJ McCarron, but I feel like if with Franks, like I don't see it, but I wouldn't sit here and say it's crazy. I mean, you throw
it's
one pick
bold,
six in the preseason,
right? Yeah, it's bold, so that's what we're going for. No, I agree with you. I think it is a long shot, and that's what makes it an interesting take to talk about. But it's one of those things where it's like if Matt Ryan were to miss any time, that it's probably gonna tank the season more or less. This team is probably already on the knife's edge of like relevance. So if Ryan even were to miss like a handful of games, it would be like, does AJ McCarron really like do enough to win those games? And I think no. So I'd almost rather just see Felipe Franks, like throw him in there, see what we can do, see if we have anything here. Because I think with Franks, there is like a slight chance that he could be something. And that's very unusual for an undrafted free agent quarterback. That's like, oh, you could actually have something here. So I like the potential there. I think he's a more exciting player. But again, in past years, it would be a done deal. We'd know AJ McCarron would be the backup. It would really just be kind of a quiet secret, or a very loud secret, I guess you could say. But it's a new staff. We don't necessarily know what Arthur Smith favors. He did bring in Ryan Tannehill, famously, in 2019. So that might lead us to believe that he does favor sort of that veteran backup. But the fact that the Falcons didn't bring in any other quarterbacks, they frequently have kept 4 in training camp. In recent years, they've kept less. But we don't exactly know what Arthur Smith wants. It could be a veteran that he prefers. It could also be that he's like, look, let's just see what we have in Franks. If he plays well in the preseason, we're willing to give him the job, and we'll go with that. But yeah, it wouldn't shock me if McCarron wins and Franks is a practice squad guy, or if they even keep all 3. But it's more fun this way, in my opinion. So let's just go for chaos.
I'm always a big fan of chaos.
All right, we're gonna do a couple more bold predictions before we get out of here. So I think DW, it was me, and then it was DW. Okay, I'm just going to go to Aaron here because I can't remember the order anymore. I'm pretty decently far into this cider as well. So, yeah, Aaron, you're up next. I apologize if I've skipped someone in the rotation, but go ahead.
I will go with, I think the Falcons will make at least one trade this summer. I don't have any clue who it's going to be. But I think that we will see, trade season happen where the Falcons do wind up trading for a player or trading away a player. But I certainly think we will get at least one trade this summer with this new coaching staff.
Yeah, I think that's actually pretty likely. You talked about Deidre Sanat and Isaiah Oliver. Those are both players that are especially Oliver, are making like a solid amount of money that the Falcons might be like, look, we don't necessarily not want this guy in our roster, but maybe there's a team that's really in bad need of a slot guy, and like the sort of measurables that Isaiah Oliver have, they like that sort of bigger corner. Maybe they could get something back for Oliver. Maybe they do end up trading for an offensive lineman, like you said. That wouldn't surprise me. I think that's a pretty good one. What do you think about that, DW?
Yeah, I think it makes a ton of sense. It really triggered me earlier with the idea of going after an offensive lineman. And I think you're going to have to give up a little bit of draft capital because it is a position of need for most NFL teams. So I think the Falcons will be giving up draft capital to go after a veteran in the trenches, whether it's we've talked about offensive line, but they could also do the same on the defensive line as well. So yeah, I think a trade makes a lot of sense. The Falcons are in a position right now where they've got some space to sign guys, but in reality, the best guys are on a roster, and in order to nab those guys away, you want to get the guy before he hits free agency, before he's cut, which is similar to what the Falcons did with Andy Levitre. They didn't wait for him to get cut, and they grabbed him when they could. And I think they gave up, a 6th-round pick for Levitre at the time. And I could see something like that being the move for this team, especially, again, when you're trying to protect your strength of your team is going to be the offense. More than likely. That's where the talent is. And if you've got a weak link there and you need to fill it, go and find somebody, a veteran that you believe fits the scheme well, that you believe will be able to plug and play, even if it's just for a year or 2 years. And yeah, I'm with Aaron. I think a trade here makes a ton of sense. And I'm going to go ahead and petition for a trade on the offensive line because I am not a believer in Josh Andrews. And I want to rewind the clock and go back and get Andy Levitre again because that was a good one.
Yeah, that was a great trade. I mean, definitely one of the best ones we saw Dimitroff make. Yeah, I mean, That would be nice because right now it's, I'm a believer in Jalen Mayfield, but even I don't think that necessarily that's going to be like super clean to start the season. So as much as I like him, we'll see. All right, DW, your final bold take for the evening.
Aaron will remember this one because last time I was on his very fine podcast, I made this prediction. This one is sort of general. I think for the first time in a very long time, the Falcons will not carry a fullback onto the 53-man roster. Aaron is shaking his head. I love you, man. I think instead they will carry 4 tight ends, and you will not see a fullback for the Falcons in the 53-man roster for 2021. That is my bold take. I am sticking with it. At the very least, Aaron, I'm consistent.
Yep,
it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
But,
all right. Aaron, you have to defend. Yeah, you have to defend Keith Smith's honor. So I'll open the floor to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think the Falcons will keep a fullback. Once the Titans picked up Kari Blasingame, probably the best fullback in the league that most people haven't heard of, midway through 2019, they've been one of the most. They've been an offense that has utilized the fullback, as much as several teams out there. Certainly in the top 6 or 7, I think, in terms of fullback usage.
Yeah.
Since then. So it's not to say that Arthur Smith's offense doesn't utilize a fullback. Now, I would agree with DW that they'll probably keep 4 tight ends, but I think they'll keep 4 tight ends and a fullback.
Yep.
I think Keith Smith, given his value, he's not the world's greatest fullback, but he's certainly a competent player and I think can do the job that this offense is looking for. He also brings value on special teams as well, given his background as a college linebacker. And so he's always been a valuable piece there. And as I talked about earlier, special teams matters, and it does wind up sort of being the difference between why certain guys make the roster and other guys wind up, on the practice squad or something like that. So I feel like Keith Smith is relatively safe, but you never know. I mean, it's one of those things that's one of the interesting things about this new coaching staff, where there may be some things that throw us for a curve. I mean, we talking about the offensive line. You go back to Dan Quinn's first summer here. We went into training camp feeling really confident that our starting offensive line was going to be Jake Matthews at left tackle, Chris Chester at left guard, Joe Hawley at center, John Asamoah at right guard, and Ryan Schrader at right tackle.
Yeah.
And by the time we got to week 1, Jake Matthews was the only one that was secure in that spot. Chester was at right guard. Mike Person was the starting center. Andy Levitri was the left guard. And Ryan Schrader wasn't necessarily on the firmest footing because the Falcons went out and got Jake Long, in part thanks to the whooping that Derek Shelby gave him in that preseason game that we talked about. So it was one of those things where, these coaching staffs, you never know. They're unpredictable, these unknowns. And so maybe DW's right there, but, I just feel like he said that just to – twist the knife.
That was a subtweet of Aaron. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I do think they'll keep the fullback. Like Aaron mentioned, Arthur Smith did use a fullback, I think at the 9th highest rate of any offense in 2020, which was still only about 10% of snaps. So, teams don't use a fullback that much, even the ones that, other than San Francisco, which uses a fullback 25% of the time. Teams only really use the fullback for a handful of plays, so to really justify the fullback, they have to make an impact elsewhere, and Keith Smith is one of the best special teams players on the Falcons right now, so I think that does give him a little bit more of a cushion, but I think DW is also right that the team will keep 4 tight ends. Absolutely. There will be 4 tight ends on the roster. I am 100% certain of that. The only thing I'm not certain about is who will be the 4th one. Jaden Graham versus, I guess, Parker Hesse. Parker Hesse is a guy that Arthur Smith has really liked, has followed him around for a couple of years now. So, someone who has maybe a chance to surprise. I know, we have a lot of Jaden Graham fans in the chat. So we'll see, what ends up going on there. But yeah, I agree with half of it. I think there will be 4 tight ends. Before I get into my take, which kind of does bleed into this a little bit, read a couple donations here. First of all, from George Costanza, $5. Thank you for your donation, George. Okay, here's his boldest take of the evening. Okay, the other one was kind of a joke, so this is his, really spicy take. Okay, he believes that Richie Grant is going to be a massive bust and a bigger disappointment than Fowler. He thinks they should have taken someone like Leon Eichenberg instead. He does hope he's wrong. I hope you're wrong too, because I could never slander Richie Grant. Okay, UCF, charge on. Okay, so I'll just pretend we didn't hear that, George. But I mean, I hope you're wrong too, George. I really like Grant. I think he's gonna be a great fit in this defense, but you never know. So I would prefer, Fowler is actually, the bigger disappointment. We've already been taught to disappoint. Fowler's already shown us how disappointing he can be. So, I'm not ready to be disappointed by our second round pick for the second year in a row. That's too much for me to bear there. Then we've got a $5 from Corey Carter. Corey, thank you so much for your support, man. We appreciate you. He says, I do 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets are great, but you still need a fullback for certain short yardage and goal line formations. Yeah, Corey, that is definitely what Arthur Smith has done in Tennessee. And because of Keith Smith's special teams, like Aaron and I were talking about, I think that makes him safe, but we asked DW for a bold take. It was bold. Okay. So, I appreciate the boldness, for sure. All right. So my final bold take before we wrap things up tonight, it is another number of players capped sort of thing, but it's in the same vein, if we're keeping 4 tight ends and a fullback and, 4 running backs, technically, if you count Cordarrelle Patterson as a running back, which the team seems to be obsessed with doing. So we're going to say that there's 4 running backs and a fullback. I believe that for the first time in a really long time, they will keep just 5 receivers on the roster. Obviously that helps, if Avery Williams, the corner they drafted, if he ends up winning the return job, that makes it really easy because they don't have to keep a 6th, returner wide receiver there. But yeah, I think it will be down to 5 receivers for the first time since I think Dan Quinn took over. So, I think they're going to use more 2 tight end sets, and with the 4 tight ends and the fullback being kept, that means 1 less wide receiver. So, what are your guys' thoughts on that potential?
Kevin, I'm curious, who are the 5? I'm assuming Ridley, Gage, Zacchaeus, and Darby are 4 of them. Who's the 5th guy in your eyes?
It would be Sharp for me, but I mean, I think there are other guys that could surprise. And I think if Chris Rowland were to win the return job or whatever, I think he'd probably be kept as a 6th guy just because. But I mean, I think Sharp would probably be the last guy for me, just because they don't really have the size. I mean, I guess technically they have Cordarrelle Patterson, but they seem pretty obsessed with playing him at running back. So don't know how many receiver snaps he would really be taking. So
yeah, I basically have a similar opinion on sort of when I'm making my 53-man roster projection. So those are the 5 receivers I have making the team, and I think you're right. Cordarrelle Patterson basically is essentially the 6th wide receiver because he can sort of play multiple roles in this offense. So there's no real pressure to keep 5 on the team. That's not bold in my book. So
okay. I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Or no, it's or maybe it is bold, but I didn't realize I was being bold by making a prediction. That's basically what
you're on the same boat, Yeah.
I'm on the same page. I guess we're just on the bold boat. Together. I guess
the bold ship. Yep. Yeah. What do you think, DW? You think so? So DW maybe thinks it'll be 6 wide receivers and no fullback. I don't know. What do you say there?
Yeah, I mean, that's clearly where I was leaning.
Okay.
Yeah, going with 6 wide receivers. But as I scan the names on the roster, maybe I can be convinced that I gave a hot take that may have been a little bit too scorching hot. But I still think that within the group of wide receivers, someone like a Christian Blake or a Chris Rowland is going to stick at wide receiver 6. And this is not meant to be hatred towards Keith Smith at all. I think he's been fantastic at the position. I just think it's a position that's being sort of phased out in the NFL in general, and that the Falcons are going to start following on that trend eventually. They've I think Aaron on your podcast, you said they've had a very long streak with having a fullback on the roster, like 20 plus years, if I remember right. So it's a streak that I think at some point does end. And this is one where I'm not passionate about it. I'm not going to bet money that Keith Smith is not going to be on the roster, but I still feel like wide receiver is going to be a little bit more where the quality and the depth is going to be, and they're going to feel like they can accomplish what they want to do in the running game with the extra tight ends. So Although I will not be surprised if they do go 5 wide receivers, because I think at this point it sounds like we all agree that 4 tight ends sounds like a foregone conclusion with what Arthur Smith wants to do.
Yeah, I agree. And, no, DW, I know the truth. You just hate Keith Smith, friend of the show, Keith Smith. So, I understand this is just all, low-key Keith Smith slander. So we'll be sure to let him know next time he's on. No, but no, I think it's a bold take, but I don't think it's unreasonable because the NFL is moving away from fullbacks. And look, Arthur Smith used a fullback at one of the highest rates in the NFL, and it was still only like 10% of the offensive plays. So, it is something that's becoming less and less of a thing, unless you're San Francisco and Kyle Shanahan, who are like obsessed with the fullback. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I like the boldness. I like the predictions. Thank you both for coming on and delivering some of those. Yeah, guys, before we get out of here, do want to remind you again, Patreon Q&A on Friday. Check that out. The Patreon is patreon.com/Falcoholic Live. Like and subscribe here on YouTube. Help support us. We appreciate those metrics, guys. Those help us out. And just a quick little plug for both of these guys. So before we get out of here, first of all, David Walker, he is at Falcoholic DW, the host of the official Falcoholic podcast. DW, anything
Street
else?
fight.
Yeah, street fight. It's about to happen. This hasn't been settled from the last time, so yeah, this is gonna be that'll be the bonus show for the patrons. But yeah, DW, anything? He's ready to go. I should have known. Yeah. Anything else you'd like to plug, man, before we get out of here?
Yeah, we're actually beginning our own preview of all the different positions. We have quarterback already up at the Falcoholic, and for the podcast, we are doing as well our game-by-game season predictions at the Falcoholic, which are 100% guaranteed to be accurate. So you can go look at those predictions. And incidentally, based on the polls that our fans have filled out, the Falcons are going to start 5-0.
Hey.
So I just want to put that into the universe. The Falcons will start 5-0. That includes against Washington and Tampa Bay, 2 games that I predicted they would lose. But our fans are very optimistic about this Falcons season. So go to thefalcoholic.com, vote in those polls, and let us know how you think this season is going to play out.
Yeah, guys, we appreciate somebody for being optimistic about this season because it can't be us. We're too jaded. So, but yeah, thanks to you loyal voters for just ride or die. We appreciate you guys. Jazz hands. Yeah. Also with us tonight, Aaron Freeman. He is at Falc Fans, host of the Locked On Falcons podcast. Definitely up there with the best Falcon shows available. I'm not going to name favorites or anything. We'll just say, all quality programs here. So, Aaron, we know you've got the show, so let us know what sort of stuff you're doing now and anything else you'd like to plug.
Yeah, Locked On Falcons. We're wrapping up our sort of pre-training camp positional previews tomorrow, Thursday, as you guys are probably checking this out. Running backs will be up. Wednesday was quarterbacks. Friday, I think, will be corners. Monday will be safeties. And then I think probably Tuesday, I'll probably wind up doing a 53-man roster prediction. You've already sort of gotten the hints on this episode and previous episodes of Locked On Falcons. So that's what's in store for Locked On Falcons. And I can't wait to see the Falcons start 5-0 because I know personally, given all the slander I have thrown Chase Young's way this offseason, that game against Washington is my own personal Super Bowl. Yep. And Jake Matthews, I'm putting it all, the chips in the middle of the table for Jake Matthews to shut down Chase Young. So I will finally be vindicated with my Chase Young slander takes throughout the world. So.
All right. Well, that's a bold take. All right. Well, it's probably going to be just 2015 all over again, right? We're going to start 5-0 and then just totally crash in the second half of the season. So that would actually be on brand for this team. So actually, I think the fans might actually be smarter than all of us predicting this 5-0 start yet again under a new coaching staff. So I see what's going on here. But yeah, guys. Again, I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic. Kevin, I'm working on the Falcoholic's written training camp previews position by position. So we're done with the offense as of tomorrow. Tomorrow will be the last one, interior offensive line. offensive tackle was today. All the skill positions already done, and then we'll be starting defense after that. So check that out if you're looking for that. And speaking of training camp, I will be there, boots on the ground, starting for the first training camp practice on July 29th. And I'm planning to, I don't know exactly what the rules are with this, but I'm hoping to be able to do a live show immediately following training camp. I don't know if video will be allowed, but I believe audio is fine. So I will be doing my instant reactions to every training camp practice. I will be there all the way through August 4th. So look forward to that, guys. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I will let you guys know. I'm planning to maybe stay, a little late, meet with some fans and stuff like that, one of the open practices, so stay tuned. I'll let you guys know what day I'm going to be doing that as well. So for both of my guests, thank you guys so much. For David Walker and Aaron Freeman, I'm Kevin Knight once again. Thank you guys for tuning in. Keep an eye on our schedule for next week. I'm not exactly sure what day we'll be doing the show because I will be flying on Wednesday. So if, it's looking good, maybe we can do it Wednesday night. It might have to be a different night. We will check on that. But until then, guys, enjoy the rest of your week. We will talk to you next time on the Falcoholic Live. Have a great night, folks.